The Phanteks Glacier One 360 M25 G2 is not only a fantastic looking all-in-one cooler, but one with some really nice highlights to it, including infinity mirror fans, a little VRM fan on the pump itself, and some other highlights too. It's easy to set up and to install, as I'll show you in a second, and you can see it here inside the Eclipse G400A. Now this is a review of the all-in-one cooler where I'm going to show you thermal performance testing at the end of the video, and I'm going to talk to you about the various things of interest that I discovered along the way while building with it and using it in this build. Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn here with a look at the Phanteks Glacier One, which as you can see comes with pre-applied thermal paste and some other nice highlights. Quite a chunky pump cap up here, and that's because of the VRM inside it. But my initial impressions was one of quality and intrigue. It has multiple cables coming out of there, and it does have additional thermal paste for when you need to rejuvenate your paste in the future, or if you're swapping to a new system, for example. So that's a handy little clue of the variety of things that Phanteks has done here to make life easy. The fans, for example, are already screwed together and set up with a link cable between each of them, so you don't need to worry about wiring too much because it's very straightforward. There is one complaint that I do have there though, and that's the way the cables sit sort of flush against the edge of the fan actually made it difficult to get the radiator screws through the fan and into the rad. This is obviously a small complaint, but I think it's one worth pointing out for when you're doing the build process. You will need to sort of wiggle the cables out of the way so that you can then screw them down. So it's little nitpicking things like that I'll be pointing out, because for the most part, this is a well thought out cooler. It comes, for example, with these little caps that you can put over the screws, so you can hide those away and keep things nice and neat. And the fact that you have the cable running down the edge there also means that the wiring is pretty easy to keep neat too, which is something I'm not terribly good at, as you'll have seen from my previous videos, but this makes it pretty straightforward. The mirrors are also protected with stickers for the most part before you install, so you can just peel those off. Now when it comes to wiring, you have options, and that's also interesting. And it is a closed system in a way, because you can take a cable from the fans and plug it into a cable that comes out of the pump, and then the cable from the pump can plug into another cable, which then has connectors on it. You can plug it directly into your motherboard. So the 5-volt RGB header and fan power header, for example, plugged in as a demo down here on the bottom of this Maximus Hero board. This then allows you to control the fan power and the RGB lighting with your motherboard software. And obviously the pump itself plugs into the CPU fan header or AIO header. If you have other parts of the Phanteks system, like the Nexlinq Hub, which you can see here, which you can buy separately, then it can be instead wired into this. So you can take that cable that I showed you initially from the pump and connect it up to this instead. So the fans are then connected to the pump's then connected to the hub, and then the hub can be wired in with other Phanteks fans and other devices, and then connected with a USB connection to your motherboard, which makes things nice and straightforward. Now, naturally, this will also work with a variety of motherboard sockets. So you can see we've got Intel and AMD, Intel 1700 socket and 1851, as I showed, AMD TR4, you've got Intel's 2011, 2066, AMD AM4 and AM5 socket motherboards as well. And so I set it up with that, and I'm going to show the wiring and setup on both of the AM5 platform and the LGA 1700 socket or 1851 as well. But basically with AM5, replace the pre-installed standoffs with these ones and then mount your cooler down over the top there. Pretty straightforward. You do need to replace the brackets on the cooler, but it works pretty seamlessly and is fairly easy to do. But for review purposes, I'm using Asus's Maximus Hero Z890 motherboard with an Intel Core Ultra 9 285K, because I wanted to demonstrate how you could use this cooler with a new socket of motherboard, which is LGA 1851 with extra pins, and also to be able to test this cooler against the new top end from Intel and show the thermal performance of that, which I'll get to in a little while. The installation process is straightforward because it comes bracketed ready for Intel out of the box. So you just need to put on the back plate and the standoffs and then make sure it'll fit nicely into your case. Obviously this is a Phanteks case, So the installation here is pretty straightforward because you can also use that hub to wire in the fans, and so basically all the fans in the system will work here nicely with it. I top mounted the all-in-one cooler in this build because that was the most straightforward thing to do, but I've done a separate video on where you should mount your all-in-one cooler because you often get better performance front or side mounting depending on your case with intake fans, so I'll link to that in the description. Now if you're using the hub that I showed you, you can make use of Phanteks software for this, which is really straightforward and puts minimal pressure on your system. You can adjust the fans connected to it to respond to CPU or GPU temperatures. You've got silent, performance, and custom fan curves in here. It's a really lightweight software. You'll see there's also a button to send to hub, so you can set it up, send it to the hub, and you don't need to run the software constantly, which is definitely a selling point there. In that software, you can obviously adjust the RGB lighting as well for not only the fans in the system, if a Phanteks fan's connected to it, but also for the fans on the radiator and the fan on the cooler itself. So you can get all the lighting there, you can get it to sync up, and then you can get some really nice displays in there. Obviously, if you're using the RGB connection with a 5-volt header to your motherboard, you'll need to use a motherboard software instead. Now, for testing purposes, I ran a number of different tests here, and if you want to see more, I'd recommend checking out the case review that I did, which I'll link to in the description as well, where I got into a lot of depth in this because I also set it out with extra fans. But I ran Cinebench 2024 on this, which is a pretty punishing test to see what the core temperatures got up to on the CPU. And what I found was we're actually getting some pretty good temperatures out here. We got up to a maximum of 86 degrees, but that was only on one core. It averaged about 64 degrees there. So it was actually running really cool for a Cinebench run like that. So I was quite impressed by that. Bear in mind, we've only got 3 intake fans in the case at this point and 4 exhaust fans as well. OCCT is another benchmarking tool that you can use that runs for an hour, putting the system under pretty heavy load. And again, I got a maximum of 88 degrees on the package there and averaging around 58 on the cores. So it was doing really well. And more importantly, it also ran quietly during these tests, and considering under how much load it was, it did really well in terms of not being overpowering with the fan noise. I'll show you later on what that sounds like as well, so stick around for that. With Cyberpunk 2077, I also ran a benchmark. My idea here was to test the performance of the cooler. I was also testing the GPU cooling as well, but that was exclusively for the case reviews, obviously not relevant here. And I wanted to see how we got on. So this is with the top-end CPU from Intel at the moment, obviously the newest one, and we're getting an average of 111 FPS in this at 1080p on maximum settings. And what we're seeing here is actually the core temperatures averaging at 43 degrees, maximum 74. Again, it's one particular core that seems to be getting hotter than the rest there, but generally speaking, it's done really well in terms of the performance, and it wasn't loud, which is very important to me. And to most people, we don't want a lot of fan noise when gaming, so that's one of the things. Now, during other benchmarks, we did Forza Horizon 5, for example, and tested that. They were basically doing some synthetic benchmarking before actual, just straight up gameplay. About 178 FPS in this instance. And again, the core temps weren't too bad. So this is set up with extreme mode on the graphics end and averaging 35 degrees C, 75 degrees maximum, and just generally nice and cool. Good performance for this as well. Now, with standard gameplay, obviously, that's an important part of it. You want to see what it's like gaming on it. And as you can hear, nice and quiet. You can hear the keystrokes and other things while I'm doing that. And then we're looking at 64 degrees maximum and 36 degrees. So just sort of standard gameplay, actually ran cooler than the benchmarking, as you'd expect. And this was the same across other games too. So Need for Speed Unbound. And I also played some Icarus and found basically similar sort of results. So at the top end, we're looking like 60 degrees or something, averaging a lot less than that. But overall, the performance has been good and it's been quiet. Now, I also set it up with additional fans, as you'll have seen from some of these shots. So check out the review of the case if you want to hear more about that and what difference that made. It did actually boost the performance of the cooler, it's worth noting. And obviously, your results may vary depending on the case you're using and your environment. But overall, it's been a good experience and one that I'd recommend. Nice and easy to set up, and easy to use. I would highly recommend getting the hub though, because it does make the wiring a lot easier, and then obviously gives you access to the Phanteks software to be able to control everything. Hopefully you found this useful. If you did, check out the links to the other videos in the description that are also relevant. Thanks for watching. You've made it right to the end of the video, you brilliant legend you. If you've enjoyed it, click that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and drop me a comment down below if you've got any questions. If you really enjoyed it, consider joining the channel and see the benefits of doing so. Check out these other videos, you might well find them interesting or useful, and most importantly, have a great life.